evening, and happy Friday. We are coming to you live with episode 11 of our weekly album discussion streams. I'm Matt, and tonight I'm joined by Cam.
Hey man, how's it going?
All good, all good. We've got some Brad here too. Not only Not only have we got Brad, we got mine, Obi. Thank you so much for the follow. Together, though, we are Ballpark Music, and every week we pick an album that came out on a Friday, give ourselves a week with it, then come back together on a stream for in-depth discussion. No scoring, no taste-making, because music is not sports. If you like what you see, give us a follow on the socials, and we will let you know when we're going live. Yeah. Did you have a good week, Cam?
It was a fairly uneventful week, to be fair. I mean, not a lot's happened, to be fair at all.
Does that make it a
actually can't
good
report
week?
anything. I feel
Or
bad for that. But yeah, it's really weird because I'm trying to remember anything that happened this week at all, and I couldn't tell you one thing. I've been watching a German TV show called Dark. That's pretty good. That's about it.
You did mention Dark the other day. You did mention Dark, and I don't think I ended up saying anything more about it at the time. So, what's your like one sentence synopsis?
German time travel, but the future affects the past, not the other way around.
Spooky, spooky, spooky. I mean,
It
speaking of,
is spooky, dude.
what's it on? Is it on?
It's on Netflix, yeah, it's on
Cool.
Netflix.
There you go.
I mean, you really gotta pay attention because if you don't, you'll miss everything and you'll have to rewind. Like, it's not a show that you can just, have on in the background. You've really got to pay attention. But it's good. It's good.
Well, speaking of the future, Brad, are you looking forward to a nice long bank holiday weekend?
Yes, I am. I think everyone is really. It feels like it's been a long week to get here, but here we are.
No
So
doubt.
exciting times.
No doubt, no doubt. Is anybody able to figure out a joke involving the episode's number this week? But like without doing
Final
this.
Tap, man.
But without doing, gotta let me finish my sentences, man. Without doing the super obvious Spinal Tap one, because I have been
You
trying
did a
to.
Good Friday joke. You're not above doing a Spinal Tap joke.
I know. I'm not above it. I just saw, let's see if we can do something a little bit different here. But hey, you're ragging on me here. Is there anything you can come up with?
There's the Spinal Tap joke, and that's it. There are no other jokes involving the number 11. That's it. It's the only one.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, cool. So what are you guys drinking tonight? Cam, why don't we kick off for you?
I'm just drinking a Kopparberg, man. I'm being boring this week. Sorry. Nothing else to say about it. Just some fruity cider from Sweden. Back to the old ways.
Nice. Yeah, so I have got gin and tonic with some frozen berries, essentially because I ran out of ice. So that was the next best thing.
That's
That's what I'm on.
You made porridge instead.
Porridge.
Your frozen berry. Yeah, put frozen berries in my porridge, man. I'm a drink.
I don't generally put gin in my porridge. So,
Well, there you go. I mean, so that is the first time I think that we have had a spirit on when we're talking about what we're drinking on stream. I can't think of another occasion when we've had spirits. So
you did a toast
I
previously.
did,
maybe
yeah,
2 or
yeah,
3 weeks
yeah.
ago.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I guess I didn't think about that because it wasn't part of the thing. And then I tried to read through a press release afterwards. So maybe I'll give you the press release duty this week. It's not as easy as you think.
No.
Yeah. Speaking of
It's a hard no.
first timers, I went down to local brewery. I think I've been threatening to do this for a few weeks and picked up a can of their Session IPA. It makes me feel like such a Shire Tory to say I went down to the local brewery and I picked up some of this, but it's really fucking good. They do it on draft. Like I have had draft beer Still haven't been to a pub yet, but like draft beer is something I think I've missed over the last year and a half. So looking forward to that. What's up? This is Water. Good to see you in chat. Cam is secretly drinking Cedrata. Does that ring any bells for you?
Told you about this, man. It's cedrata. It's Italian.
Lemon.
It's that
No?
lemon drink.
Yeah,
I keep telling you
lemon one.
about. That citrusy drink. It's the best thing in the world, and I wish I was drinking it now, but I'm not. I'm drinking Copperberg. I wouldn't be secretly drinking that. I'd be talking about it for hours if I was drinking that. Not even drinking about it, and I'm going on.
So I tell you what, we are going to come in hot this week with our album that we are discussing this week, just appearing on screen for you now. And that's right, we've got Olivia Rodrigo's debut album, Sour, which was released last Friday. And we've spent the week with it. So as per the usual, let's take a look at the press release off the top. Olivia Rodrigo has unveiled her debut album, Sour. The 18-year-old singer and actress, who achieved chart success with her debut single, Driver's License, when it was released in January, has shared the artwork and track listing for the hotly anticipated LP, which was released on May 21st. It features her record-breaking hit and recent single, Deja Vu. Alongside the album artwork, Olivia wrote on Instagram, quote, "My debut album, Sour, out May 21st. The record has been teased in the description for the music video Deja Vu. Olivia recently shared how while she wanted to write a song... let me try that one again. Olivia recently shared how she wanted to write a song about the feeling of having lived through the present situation before, Deja Vu, because she was fascinated by it. She said, "The concept of deja vu has always fascinated me, and I thought it would be cool to use it in a song around the complex feelings after a relationship ends. I started writing and recording Deja Vu last fall and had so much fun creating the different melodies and sonic textures you hear." End quote. The Bizarre star made chart history with the release of Driver's License, as it became the UK's longest running #1 debut single since Gnarls Barkley's 2006 hit Crazy, while also consistently topping the charts in the US and elsewhere. Olivia explained, quote, "I mean, that is just everything. All the recognition the song has got is beyond my wildest dreams. Taylor Swift, who is my songwriting idol, and I wouldn't be half of the woman and songwriter I am today without her, reached out and was so supportive of that song." So, I was doing some research ahead of this week's stream, and there's certainly a lot to dig into when it comes to this album, but it was Time Magazine's article about it that really caught my eye. And the headline was just, "Who is Olivia Rodrigo? How did she become pop's newest star?" Does anybody want to take a crack at answering that question?
Well, I think there's first, before we get into that, there's two big takeaways from the press release. One, how the hell did Gnarls Barkley release Crazy in 2006?
I know.
That seems what? That's far too long ago for that song to come out. I thought that was like 2012 or something. But the other one is maybe we would have got more plays on Spotify if we just promoted our album by going
Just real quick before we move on from Gnarls Barkley, so I saw that and immediately just went in my head like, what happened to CeeLo Green? Like, he was everywhere and then just suddenly nowhere. Like, all of a sudden, like he just seemed to stop existing around like 2014. And I think the answer is the odd second here and there of like reality shows and stuff like that, and also maybe some misdemeanor cases here and there too. But like, that dude was fucking everywhere and then fucking nowhere.
I'm sure he's still about in the industry. I haven't really followed his career or anything like that, but I'm sure I've seen him do a couple of things.
Yeah, not released music for a long time. But anyway, none of Gnarls Barkley's stream. This is an Olivia Rodrigo one. Do you know the answer to who she is and how she is pop's biggest star?
Well, I think Same thing that happens to everything. Same thing that happens to the likes of Billie Eilish and happened to Nirvana before. She wrote a great song that connected with people. I don't think it needs to be much deeper than that, really.
And that was Driver's License, right?
I think so. Yeah, that came
Okay.
out in January. The other two, obviously, Billie Eilish. She had Ocean Eyes way before she got really famous, but Bad Guy was the big one that blew her up. And you think about other genres. Nirvana had Smells Like Teen Spirit. It just takes one song to catapult you from relatively unknown to the biggest name in the music industry, isn't it? So,
And so, had you come across Olivia Rodrigo before?
before listening to the album, yeah, I'd heard Driver's License and I'd heard Deja Vu on the radio about a week ago for the first time, and actually, I'm not going to go into it now, but it really stood out to me for a variety of reasons. I think I just had Radio 1 on in the car, which in the UK is obviously our big radio station, the main player. So, yeah, it stood out on that station, and I think it's quite obvious why it stood out on that station when you listen to the track.
And Brad, how about you? Had you heard of Olivia Rodrigo before we had that conversation picking the album this week?
Definitely heard Driver's License when that was around and doing its thing. Um, Also, I think Rick Beato did like a mini kind of review of it in one of his like I've just listened to the top 10 kind of videos. So yeah, I've heard that, and I didn't hear Deja Vu though until this week.
And I think so I mentioned Bizarre in the press release as well, and it might be useful context for this discussion. But that so I mean I didn't know this, but that was a Disney Channel show, and Olivia Rodrigo, as somebody who'd been in High School Musical, the series, I think is the right way to title that. I've not caught up with all of those, but there is obviously a long line of pop stars and artists and things like that who got their start on the Disney Channel. I guess for both of you guys, where does that kind of very wide alumni of musicians tend to land for you and your tastes?
This one feels a little bit different, I think. I mean, the big one, the obvious one's Miley Cyrus. Obviously, coming from Hannah Montana to become an international sensation. I love Miley Cyrus, make no bones about it. I think she writes great music. I think she's got an amazing voice. Seen her live a couple of times, and she's been awesome there as well. And I thought of think of the other ones as Demi Lovato, Selena Gomez, people like that. I feel like this one's a little bit different though because I feel like they were bigger names before they went in. I don't feel like she has the Disney baggage kind of thing. Like, oh, she's only a famous musician now because she was Disney. I don't really feel like that's kind of part of her canon, or it certainly hasn't been spoken about in the same way. So I think it's a slightly different scenario, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe more people know her for Disney than I do.
Yeah, just to go back to Miley a second, we were talking briefly earlier before stream about Breakout. It's another one I think is gonna kind of discuss you about when it came out. So I think it came out in like 2007 or 2008 or something like that.
2009, I knew that. I'm pretty sure it was 2009 or 10 because it was just before the last series of Hannah Montana. I'm
Okay,
sorry that I knew that.
that
I'm
was
so sorry.
that was the test. Yeah, I think it's interesting that you said about not having the Disney baggage because I feel like some people have done a lot to very deliberately kind of move away from that in quite a like drastic and dramatic way, whereas this doesn't quite feel like it's such a deliberate kind of shunning of everything that's come before. It doesn't feel like it's that kind of bold step away. It doesn't feel obviously like that anyway.
So, I think prepping for this stream, it was interesting thinking about. Obviously, you have got those names that you've already mentioned there, Cam, and a lot of those being a little more recent artists. I mean, as you say, like Miley Cyrus's debut is one of those things that if you look back now, you're just like, oh God, we're getting old. This is happening way too quick. But there's another lot of names that spring to mind as well, right? So like Hilary Duff, Justin Timberlake, Britney Spears, these are all artists that got their start on Disney by some way or another. And I mean, I alluded to it back in episode 1, but like my formative years were soundtracked by boy bands. NSYNC were part of that. If memory serves me right, my mom actually banned me from listening to Justin Timberlake's solo album when it came out, and her concerns were probably justified when 10-year-old me settled down to watch the Super Bowl 38 halftime show and saw him expose Janet Jackson's boob on live television. But yeah, I mean, beyond that, in recent years, I've been largely dismissive of the candy coated pop that has come out of the debut of another graduate of the Mouse's House. You can blame it on the Jonas Brothers, you can blame it on mainstream High School Music, or you can blame it on me, but they've never really piqued my interest of late. Nevertheless, been expanding my horizons and musical tastes. So yeah, really excited to give a listen to an album that's had a lot of buzz around it, I think.
Yeah, sure. And I will say, like, obviously, ex-Disney stars don't always make music for people like us. Um, but they always are pretty much, you can guarantee, very talented people at the very least. Like, none
No
of them
doubt. Yeah.
are alumni of that kind of place, and at least don't have a great voice. You can say what else you want about them, but at least they'll all have that.
No doubt. No doubt. Anyway, should we get into the track by track? All these song names on this album are stylized in lowercase type, by the way. So imagine that we are whispering whenever we say them aloud, unlike the album title, which is black caps. So we're screaming that whenever we say it. And we kick off with Brutal. This probably starts exactly how I thought this album would sound straight off the bat, but that changes pretty rapidly, right, Brad?
Yeah, so you're in with these kind of soft strings, kind of, I guess, what you might expect to go into this. I didn't really know what to expect either. And then you get, I want it to be like nasty, and then you've got that like descending kind of chromatic riff coming in. Great drum sound, heavier than expected for sure. And yeah, then you're kind of into like verse territory. Similar riff on the acoustic guitar, still keeping that like chromatic rundown kind of vibe going. Vocal delivery here is really cool. It's like a deadpan kind of. She is just talking, and she's very much sticking to the rhythm of the riff. It's very simple. Before it kind of builds heading to the chorus. Yeah, like this song interested me because it felt like the hook was mainly like based around that kind of riff rather than anything else, like rather than a big vocal hook or something, which I would definitely be expecting from an album like this, but it was like a riff based hook, which I was quite surprised with.
Yeah, well, I was slightly less surprised, but only because I'd read leading up to listening to this that she was a big fan of alt rock growing up and garage rock and stuff like that. And as soon as I heard that chromatic progression, really cool, by the way. It sounds really great. I really enjoy that kind of thing. It reminded me straight away of something like the White Stripes, which again you probably wouldn't expect from ex Disney person, but you kind of immediately that is gone from your mind, and it feels quite authentic as well, which is something that maybe doesn't always happen when you're trying to lose the Disney shackles kind of thing. And yeah, you sort of said about that cool spoken word progression is really great. Like kind of detailing her angst about being how old she is. Production is great, and the voice immediately is really really good. That there's no getting away from that. It's a really great voice, and it's quite stripped back in quite a lot of ways, but it's really heavy in others. And it kind of delivers that great line at the end of the chorus. God, it's brutal out here. I'm not going to try and deliver it like she does because that'll never happen. But it's got all the space for that to really land. So there's some great songwriting in there as well. Great production choice to let that happen. Yeah, really really interesting start to an album that I was kind of half expecting, but also wasn't expecting it to go that far.
Yeah. I will put down that my mind went to the Ramones on that chord progression, but I think you could probably slap any three power chords together at any point and just go, hey, that reminds me of the Ramones. Really excited when this track started. This new wave of pop artists kind of wading into guitar driven, almost pop punk esque tracks is something that I'm very much enjoying at this moment in time. I'm going to leave kind of some of my more detailed thoughts on that for some other tracks where I think it's done better than here. And yeah, I mean, you've both mentioned the spoken delivery. It reminded me to an extent of Hobo Johnson. And I think musically this could have been on his last album too. We've spoken over the last few weeks particularly about intro tracks and how they're supposed to, help set the scene and, get some of those lyrical and musical themes embedded straight off the bat. But honestly, I think my favorite way to open up an album is to subvert expectations. Idol's, God, what was the opening track off Joy is an Act of Resistance? Colossus? Is that right?
Colossus,
Yeah, Colossus.
Yeah.
Perfect example of that. And, Joe did an interview where, he spoke about how they wanted to start off with a really regimented tempo to begin with. And then after 2 minutes, just go completely fucking nuts just because they wanted to say okay, this is what you're expecting. But then us as the band, us as the artist, we're going to grab you around the neck and we're going to go, no, we're the ones who are going to be saying what's going on here. And Brutal does just that. You're coming in with an idea of what an ex-Disney teenage star's sound should be. You have that for a bar and it's just nope, it's not going to be that at all. So, it's not a bad track. Didn't blow me away, but I think it does a really, really good job in this opener spot.
Yeah, it was not the best song I've ever heard. It's not the worst song I've ever heard, but it is just that. It is a really great intro to an album, and it's quite gonna throw you from what's gonna come next. Till it kind of gets to that outro where it slows down a bit and kind of shows you what this album is more about in a lot of places. That kind of piano-led, softer approach on a lot of tracks. But yeah,
the string part kind of echoes enough of the main riff to kind of fit with the track. But it is a nice intro and outro. Yeah, just some of the sounds. I think this does set you up quite well for some of the sounds that you're going to hear on the heavier tracks, like those dirty drums come through a few times, kind of really aggressively clip saturated kind of sound, and the vocals as well works really well with her delivery when she is delivering those more angsty lines. You've got nicely saturated vocals. It just works really well together.
Yeah, and I think Cam, you mentioned it as well. It does set up the lyrical themes. It's not the deepest track lyrically that we've had over the last few weeks by any stretch of the imagination, but it's all things that are going to be presented to you throughout the rest of the album. Young, Insecure, and yeah, pretty clearly laid out in the opener. But right, let's move on to Traitor then. And as you alluded to, just as quickly as my expectations were shattered by the last song, a choir and an organ rebuild them as beautiful stained glass windows. Have you got a beat on what this album is going to be yet, Cam?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think this is pretty normal. There's a lot of artists doing things like you think about the Phoebe Bridgers album. There's a lot of songs on there like Chinese Satellite, which is really soft, and then you end with I Know the End, and it's this huge cacophony of sound and this kind of almost punk ending to an album. So I think that kind of thing's a bit more common than maybe it would be expected. So I kind of felt like because of the intro to the last song, because of the outro to the last song, we'd maybe built her into this because I know she'd been influenced by Taylor Swift and a lot of this song in particular and songs that will come later could have been on Folklore. Um, you've got that kind of really pleasant choral opening, like transitioning into it's almost like chamber pop, I'd say. So definitely fits for me, just her pad and her voice kind of thing. The thing I really like about this actually is it's a lot of modern pop's a little bit too perfect sometimes, and there's still a touch of grit to the voice, not in terms of like she's saturated or anything like that, but you can hear some K's and some C's sometimes, and it's not all completely filtered out and completely got rid of, which is really nice. She's not reinventing the wheel here in terms of harmony and melody, but it's really nice and well put together.
It's a really interesting point that, I mean, it was something that I was planning on mentioning on this track. And then, I think that was going to be the last of it. But, you do pick up kind of some of those quirks throughout, I think, the album where, it's almost like the odd word here and there isn't actually being finished off. So like now it sure as hell doesn't look like it is one of the first examples that you get. It never becomes an it. It simply kind of remains like an eh. And I could never tell if it was a quirk of her accent and like, hey, I'm the last person to judge about, accent quirks coming through in your singing voice. But yeah, it was something that I definitely caught on, I think, throughout the album.
Yeah, there are a few like quirky accent bits that come through, and like you say, Cam, it is not. It never gets to a point where it feels sterile. If you see what I mean, like it feels like it's been kind of sterilized and all the character has been stripped out of it, which is really nice to hear for something I guess you kind of expect those Disney connotations of everything's going to be like deliberately perfect. There are a few points in this where it's really nice to hear some like organic kind of stuff. Um, Other than that, this to me kind of just felt like a fairly straightforward-ish ballad. You've got the kind of 3/4 or like 6/8 kind of feel, so it kind of lilts along nicely. Um, Definitely more of a vocal-driven song than the last one. Whereas I said like that hook was kind of driven by the riff. This is more like kind of your kind of stereotypical like bedroom ballad kind of vibe. Again, some nice sounds coming through. I really like the way it kind of builds, like the emotional intensity of it, and like the arrangement as well. It really like fills out nicely as it goes through. Um, for a song called Traitor as well, like I maybe it's because I've listened to too much metal in the past, but you expect it to be a bit more aggressive from the start, and it starts really kind of softly, but it builds like quite nicely into that like angst that she's obviously putting across with it.
Yeah, so we spoke about lyrics on the last track. You really do on Trader hit on the most common theme of the album here, and it's that all-consuming teenage romance. And yeah, you gotta buckle up at this point because there is a lot more coming. Remember, I brought her up and you told me I was paranoid, you betrayed me, and I know you'll never feel sorry for the way I hurt. Yeah. And like I don't want to be too dismissive of I guess some of the lyrical content too, because as much as you look at it as a teenage romance, the subject of the song is talking about straight up gaslighting, right? All I did was speak normally. Somehow I struck a nerve. You got me fucked up in the head, boy. Never doubted myself. There's a bit of coercive control in there too. I'd leave you, but the roller coaster is all I've ever had. It's very, very serious stuff for all of the beauty of the musical surrounding.
There's one thing I've written down here is it in some ways it feels quite mature. Like I don't want, like I said to you before the stream, I don't want to harp on about her age because I don't want to be condescending. You know, you can be 18 and write great albums still, but you know, you kind of hear the lyrics on surface value and you think, oh, okay, lovesick 18-year-old kind of, you know, we've all been there kind of thing. It's very typical. But then you kind of listen again, and there's some really mature lines in there. There's some really smart writing in there too. Especially later in the album, I want to talk about that more because there's a song in particular that's got some really really smart writing on and some really great lines in it. But it's a bit deeper, like you were saying, than kind of it hits on the surface, which is really interesting. Um, and yeah, and it's juxtaposed to that kind of choral song, that very sort of pretty ballad thing that's going on in the background. You got, you know, acoustic guitars and layered sounds and stuff like that. Drums that sound a bit like they've been played out in the hall, kind of thing. So it's yeah, it's a really interesting kind of duality going on there.
Definitely. And
Yeah.
sorry, Brad, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the duality theme kind of comes through again later in this album in some really interesting ways. I think you're right. There is like that tendency to, especially knowing the background of the artist, like listen to it just on the surface level and then not kind of dig any deeper and go, okay, this is a teenage, like a love song, kind of lovesick thing, and might deserve a bit more attention than that. I think a friend of mine said to me, this sounds very much like it was written for TikTok. And while that is true, and I have heard it on TikTok a few times, I think there is also some deeper stuff going on as well.
I hadn't considered that aspect of it. I am a non-tic tac. See, there you go. That just shows how much of an old man I am about this stuff. The old Tic Tac. Don't you get those from the store? They come in orange and mint. Yeah, I don't use that, but you're right. There is so much music that is written for it. I'll continue to try and make a serious point for as long as you guys need. Don't worry about it.
I think I'm good. I've just had many people in my life being angry old men yelling about the Tic Tacs, not understanding the TikTok, so it's all good. just old man yells at clouds,
Yeah.
kind of vibes.
Back in my day, we just used
Anyway,
to
yeah, it's
chew
a
on.
smart song. Yeah, we should bring back MySpace. Remember, it was
Yeah.
30 seconds and you're done, man. You had a whole page. You listened to the music. You had your top 8 friends.
And you wanted to be edgy, so you put Tom in there, you know, yeah. Just to get us back on track for a second, I mean, you know, it is a wonderful vocal performance, I think, on this song. There's spots that I prefer over others for sure. But you can't argue that she's got a great voice. Very much enjoyed the power in the bridge. The lyrics, you know, aren't maybe at their most complex there. But the emotion that her performance packs in saves it from ever feeling contrived, I think.
100%. I think you can kind of sense we talked last week about St. Vincent, how it was unusual to have other people doing your backing vocals these days. It was quite clear to me that Olivia Rodrigo's doing her own backing vocals on this, and they're quite diverse in some places on this album, and in this song they are, and it shows you the range that she has, just being able to do that many kind of different types of vocal. There's more bassy ones, there's much higher ones than her usual register kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, you can't say it. This album always was going to be an introduction to her and an introduction to her voice. You know, she signed to Geffen; they know what they're doing. So a lot of this album felt like it was set up just to showcase that, and this song's no different.
Yeah, some really nice moments in the backing vocals here as well, especially on that bridge where you've already mentioned you've got like those kind of really mournful kind of R's that like she's kind of layering behind her, and does really sound nice. And then obviously it like ends on the kind of minor four chord, like that. If like the ending just doesn't feel like it resolves, it kind of leaves that like unresolved kind of tension, which is really nice going into the next song.
I'm so glad that I've got you here, Brad, because, I can hit the end of a song and just go like, this doesn't feel right. Why do I feel a little bit weird? And you can just go, oh, it's a, minor fourth. It doesn't resolve. That's why. So appreciate that very much. Thank you. Education every week. And as you say, we do move on to the next song, Driver's License. So I do want to just divert here for a quick second and go back to something that you said last week, Cam Dash said off the top of this stream too. And, when we were talking about this album, you said something to the effect of, if you've been in a car over the last few months with the radio on, you've probably heard this song. And, given the fact that it was mentioned in the press release that this has become the longest running #1 debut single in UK charts history, again, it's not another point that you can argue, but it's gotten me curious. How often has that happened for you in recent months, right? And is that something you do often, hopping in a car with like mainstream radio play?
Yeah, actually, every time I hop into a car, I always have Radio 1 playing because I know, because of what we want to do going forward, essentially, as people who want to work in this business, I always feel like Radio 1's a good spot if you don't have to listen to it for 8 hours in a row where they just repeat themselves constantly, to see what's out there now, what the style of music is. You'll hear all the great producers that are currently doing work on these albums out there at the moment, and you just get a real sense of what is happening at the moment, which is why not this song, but there's a song on this album really stood out to me because it sounded so different to everything else that's happening on the radio at the moment. This song doesn't particularly stand out to me in that same way. Oh, maybe it does. I mean, it's the huge single from the album, and it's quite ballady, which isn't very popular at the moment. But yeah, I mean, yeah, that's basically why I listen to mainstream radio a lot. It's not necessarily that I enjoy it, but I feel like you can learn a lot just from sticking on Radio 1 and not just listening to the same songs that you'd hear